Thank you, everyone. We're now recording the meeting, for broadcast later on, the Transportation Council's, page. I want to thank everyone for joining us here today. I want to provide a number of updates of where we are with the, Vision Zero Safety Action Plan. Going to go through a number of, items here today, looking towards, setting the target statement. The Transportation Council is going through their long range plan development. So there's these two processes are kind of coming into alignment. Providing an update on speed limit assessments, where we are on the road safety and concept development, having a discussion about kind of what will comprise the safety improvement program, as well as some updates here today. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in anytime. We have a formed group here today. So we want to talk about the the elements that will be part of a Vision Zero target statement. As part of the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, there's a requirement to set a target for reduction in fatalities and serious injuries. That does not specify a particular date. And I think we're going to walk through today kind of some of our methodology, the project team's methodology of how we're going about to do it, how it aligns with other efforts, and how everything's, generally complementary. I think there's pretty much broad consensus around the table and in the room online here that we want to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. I think, I think we don't need to get hung up too much on different performance management requirements and CFR sections. And I think what we've done does show that how we're all kind of moving together in a positive, proactive performance management way here. And this will hopefully inform the long range plan as well too, and continue to be a pillar of that process. And so as I was mentioning too, that really each of these efforts are complementary, whether it's the strategic highway safety plan, within that, the highway safety plan and the highway safety improvement program annual report, what we see here then at the regional level, and then working down to local resolutions as well. So really, as part of this statement, there will be another aspects of identifying leadership. Having a shared commitment and following through with accountability of that, fostering engagement. The Safe Streets and Roads for All program has brought, an unprecedented number of partners around the table. Safety is no longer the purview of TRB and technical conversations. It's really something meaningful to everyone. It's probably what gets some of the most people out to meetings. And so something we can continue to bring in to the process. And through the process we've gotten really meaningful feedback. And lastly, transparency as well. As we can, continue to share data, share our process, and really allow people, to peek in the window and peek underneath the hood too, kind of how it's all done. So really just some quick bullets of, we identify within some of these key principles of what some of this means. So to identify leadership, really through the overall adoption of the plan will be the policy board of the Transportation Council adopting this and adopting the plan. Continuing to work with ROSAC, sort of within that, not indented, but really just continuing to help and guide some of the implementation. Everyone here is either working on projects, working on studies, advancing programs. So making sure that this group becomes, safe, that the safety, part of the S and ROSAC still stays centered. Through the commitment and accountability. Today we're going to talk a lot about the target and kind of how we'd like to get there. Then lastly, some of the implementation report and some of the additional performance metrics of what we'd like to do. With that, foster engagement, through the Transportation Council's advisory committees, recognizing them, making safety, filtering safety through, the different topic areas about active transportation, through even to Health and Human Services. And lastly, transparency too. We're developing a data dashboard as part of the project. And I think there's additional allowing people those tools and building that literacy around safety performance management. We've talked about this a little bit before, but I think as the Transportation Council is moving towards developing their long-range transportation plan, and this plan moves towards further development, we wanted to take some time today to try to pin down this target of really two key targets of eliminating fatalities by 2050 and reducing serious injuries by 50% by 2050. 2050 is the upcoming plan horizon year, and similar to a lot of what other metropolitan planning organizations are doing around the state. So really kind of the target setting process has brought in a few different layers of comparison and analysis. One, plotting really a long and term fatalities trend. With our fatalities data, we're able to go back to the 1975, with the fatal accident review system. So we have that data, and we can really see, kind of how we've done over the long term. Serious injuries, our reporting data is a little more in the near term, about 10 years of data, and the definition of serious injuries has continued to change. And so lastly too, with the comparison of multiple periods, bringing different, various trends together, understanding, kind of interpreting what we've seen over these different years.
Where do you get the data for the serious injuries? Because that's not in FARS.
That's right? Not in FARS. Yes, that's in the Traffic Safety Statistical Repository. Yeah, serious injuries, like every state that has their own. Yeah. So yeah, for New York State, it's much. Then just and kind of keeping in context too. New York State DOT's HSIP performance target setting since 2017 as well too. Keeping in mind that how those targets have been set. And as we look at kind of comparing annual reductions of each. So this table here shows a rolling 5-year average of fatalities. Going back from 1975 to 1979 through 2021. And there's, been significant drops, and, there are reasons that can be punctuated throughout that timeline. New York State being the first to require seatbelts, changes in vehicle technology, improvements to our roadway system, changes in societal. Yeah. Someone tell me I am not sharing the screen. Yeah. Did it go away? Okay. So am I sharing or not sharing?
I see your screen currently.
Oh, sorry, everyone. So just to, well, everyone in the room had it, let's read. So thank you. So for this long-term trend, shows the, nearly 50% reduction of fatalities over nearly a 50-year period. From the 70s onward, and I wanted to kind of note those trends over different times. And really seeing our biggest decline was really occurring over the 1990s. Then to the right, if we took a long-term historical projection, and this is why we want to show multiple trends together, because you can have fun with trend lines, but I think that this is where the coach Alex Patel comes in a little bit. We've seen our crashes and our fatalities increase, kind of pre-COVID, through COVID, and kind of coming out of it. But, you know, through other periods as well, in the early 2000s, and beginning of the 90s, we've seen increases in fatalities as well, and we've made strides before. So there's been an up and down throughout history. Though, you know, so I'm a history major at heart still. I don't want to say that say that there's a deterministic arc of history anywhere here, but they're really just to give that optimistic view that crashes have trended downward in the past. Our overall, our network and our network outcomes have responded to previous interventions. So I remain optimistic that, you know, through future outcomes, you know, particularly through the application of a comprehensive system approach, that future reductions can be made as well. So really to the right here, you know, wanted to kind of highlight, because I think what brings we show this graphically through the trend line, but then as we kind of begin to compare some of the target setting that we've been doing at an annual process every winter, late fall, early winter, going to the Transportation Council Board, you know, setting, you know, supporting statewide targets each year. And they've been primarily in the lower, you know, percentages, 1-2%. But really throughout the 90s, there was about an average annual reduction of 5% a year. And that even with the increases we've seen throughout the beginning of this decade, really saying negative 2% reduction overall. So we're keeping in mind throughout this that really about that change of what we saw in the 90s. That's maybe not an outlier, but something that's still, you know, aspirational that we look to achieve again. So not proposing anything unprecedented, but something that's still going to take a lot of get up and go. Now kind of switching over to the traffic, not to highlight just one small source node in the bottom left, but switching over to the traffic safety statistical repository, looking at, you know, kind of where we've been in this period where we have seen some increase, and that the forecast is still about kind of the same, but keeping in reference kind of that slope of the long-term trend. What could we do to that this is, you know, what we're seeing now, if we took a look at the near term, isn't as is a bit of a deviation from where we think we could be in the long, you know, taking a longer view of history. So if we begin to take a look at creating a policy-based goal, setting something aspirational of having 0 crashes by 2050, kind of how does that compare straight line to straight line? So that would be an even slower pace than what the long-term trend would be. And then lastly, so kind of how does this align? Really looking at the, you know, kind of the near term versus different than a 5% compounded growth each year. I know we're talking about whole people. So, but just kind of for comparison, that there is that maybe in the midterm, you know, would reevaluate the measure, but that overall there's that 0 by 2050 is pretty feasible. Then setting that target and committing to about that 5% annual reduction each year can get us through, make that steady progress over the next decade. I just want to pause right now, see if anyone has any questions.
Are these projections going to be updated data?
Yeah, 2024 days updating, which you might be able to do.
Well, is it part of like a tracking strategy?
Yeah, and I think really overall, what we'd show is that even though we may set these targets. Kind of looking, like I know, for example, as we do our reporting each year, how do we compare to where we've set the baseline? So. Looking at years 2024, 25, how have we done? You know, are we below or above that orange line? Um, You know, hopefully. You know, hopefully some of our years will be on both sides of it. I'll say, you know, hope every year below it, but maybe. You know, that gives us something to, as we assess the plan, look towards doing the next long range. Plan again in another 5 years, using that really as a yardstick to say, you know, how are we doing? Similarly, looking at serious injuries as well. I mean, as part of the safety action plan, looking at both fatalities and serious injuries are two types of levels of crashes that have significant impacts, and then hopefully that through reducing crashes that result in fatalities, lowering that severity so that they just become serious injuries, and then serious injuries become minor injuries and further down. Serious injuries have been kind of the definition's been a bit of a moving target over time, data wise, but the numbers have been generally kind of flat and peaked up over this period as well. So there's not a long-term trend for serious injuries since we have a different data set. But you know, the thought would be to reduce these by 2050, knowing that we won't ever reduce all crashes. We're looking at doing reducing the severity of those crashes that result in fatalities. And it's still a pretty substantial change in the slope. And this is about a 2.5% annual increase, so kind of pretty aspirational with some of the larger NISDOT targets that we've had. I don't think we've ever exceeded more than a 2% annual target a year. So this would be making sure that we kind of stay in line with that, and then, you know, having that focus on fatalities as well. So just to summarize, these targets for fatality and serious injuries are both based, you know, policy based and trend based. So kind of taking the trend, but then also setting an aspirational policy. It reflects kind of some areas of best performance, but that's, you know, that's, I mean, maybe I've run a 7-minute mile before. That's not to say I should go run a 5-minute mile. So maybe I can get back to running a 7-minute mile again. Like these targets align with the council's long range transportation plan, provide a good beacon in which to, you know, to guide navigating that process. These targets are complementary to those that NISDOT does each year. There's not anything in terms of regulation I think would change, or the highway safety plan, and but rather kind of guide these efforts because they are the near-term targets can be done, but still in support of those plans and efforts as well through the strategic highway safety planning. And you know, we certainly do and hope that more than just can and should targets be revisited in future safety action plans. Any questions? So with the with the Transportation Council's policy statement, we are also producing a local policy resolution template, so that you know, communities, which we've gotten great feedback so far, you know, can, hearken to the regional goal and that aligns with the state goal. And to, initiate their, support of the plan, make their commitment, and sort of establish their own leadership commitment as well. For their own communities. We got some great feedback from our community advisory committee this week too. There was interest from, private sector folks, other, institutions about supporting that as well. So we're gonna tweak that, resolution so that, hopefully we see supporting resolutions coming in from public and private partners as well. Associations, et cetera.
You know what the private sectors were, like, what type of businesses or?
It was, one of the members is involved in the trucking association and kind of whether things may be done at state level or maybe there's regional chapters that can, or maybe some businesses that want to, take that support as well too. So, maybe some ways like we see with kind of on bike, with bicycling, groups kind of looking towards that. It'd be great to see other organizations want to take that step as well.
I'll just say before we move on, if you do have comments about these proposed targets and you just don't want to say them in a group setting, please feel free to email me. I had sent the meeting agenda out last week or so. So you should have my email address, and feel free to send me any thoughts you have on them.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, if anyone has any technical questions, wants to see base data, happy to provide them. Jumping to another part, I think a complementary part of the agenda we're talking about too is that, so when the questions come up, how are we tracking this each year? Developing an implementation annual report. So when it kind of gets to become halfway through the year, and kind of in line with the HSIP annual report, as we get our finalized crash figures for the previous year, tracking our annual performance measures, but also with this too, taking a stock of some of the action plan processes, programs, and projects that are being recommended, what's sort of happening, highlighting those key partnerships, and having just an annual report that really helps publicize and keeps this action plan from being gathering dust on the shelf. So kind of with that, to harken back to that accountability, just whether that's a sharp finger or just helping to kind of sunlight and give a friendly wink and nudge to everyone, so we keep on moving forward in that way, keeping the momentum moving. Some of the recommended performance measures would be those HSIP performance measures, since those would be kind of keeping that in the context. And then some additional measures that have been of interest, kind of to different groups that we've talked to, have been crashes, fatal, and serious injury by municipality, and also by facility owner type. We can look at some other geographic breakdowns as well, based on certain concentrations of different communities. But these performance measures are relatively easy to be calculated. Thank you, Andrew, for making it clear. Recently, some of these latter two additional measures more clear recently. But if there are others that folks think should be included, it would be germane to the conversation for everyone to see each year.
What does the facility owner type mean?
So that would be kind of state, locals.
Like NISDOT
through
roads, Albany County roads.
Oh, okay,
There's
gotcha, oh, gotcha,
Within the county,
okay,
there's town roads and county roads and state roads.
okay.
On performance measures, I was just gonna suggest maybe fatalities per 100,000, sorry, yeah, per 100,000 population is a good performance measure for the region as a whole, because that allows us to compare ourselves to other regions, whereas per million VMT only is only capturing some of the exposure, so it doesn't capture pedestrian or bike exposure. So it might be helpful to do. And the per 100,000 population doesn't reward us for having more driving going on.
Okay, no, thank you, yeah, should have once before, but that's great. Any other highlight real measures that folks have seen, or at least presented, please let us know. I think so kind of the intent of this is to, as we, go through with, hopefully should not be a rote process of assessing our performance measures each year and just saying, yes, we agree with the state. Bringing this additional context and, letting this be an opportunity to garner attention for all the actions of doing around the region for safety. Sure, with Matthew here, kind of some of the status of what we're doing, our speed limit assessments, some of the findings out of Schenectady, and some of the next steps of where we're going.
Sure. So some exciting news, which is that the first of the speed limit assessments that we did, or investigations that we did for 25-mile-per-hour area-wide speed limits. The first of those investigations was for Schenectady, for the city of Schenectady, which is lowering its speed limits citywide to 25 miles per hour after this investigation and following those recommendations. That Schenectady joins Albany and Kingston, as well as some villages and towns around New York State. And we're studying 4 other cities in the region: Saratoga Springs, Troy, Green Island, and Watervliet. Green Island and Saratoga Springs are in full draft, and Troy and Watervliet are under development. So we're making significant progress on this topic and hope to see more action. Cities.
Just a bit of a highlight for folks kind of looking at the specific corridor work that we've been doing too in each of these 5 communities. So a relatively focused number of group 2 corridors.
Right. So within each, and I know this committee's heard a lot about speed limits, but within each city, the streets that are classified as local are in group 1, and then in group 2, we investigate a handful of streets to essentially evaluate whether the streets of that type in that city are suitable for 25 miles per hour. And so this is just a list of really only some of the locations that we investigated. Here's an example. This is Schenectady. We analyzed a number of arterial and collector streets, and within those there were a few that weren't ideal for a 25 mile per hour limit. So for example, in the lower right corner you see State Street. There's a part of State Street that was 30 miles per hour and is now going to be 25 miles per hour. The yellow highlighted part of State Street was 35 and is now going to be 30. So that's a step down, and that's based on the context that it runs through, rather than saying, oh, State Street is all principal arterial, which all of it is classified as a principal arterial, but it runs through multiple distinct contexts. So they each need their own speed limit. Just a word about functional class. A lot of the time, you can see actually State Street on there in is the one of the green dotted lines, those principal arterial streets. So that's an example where, you know, that runs through downtown Schenectady, through neighborhoods, through the what we call the general urban zone, and then further into the suburban zone. And so having the functional class is really just one starting point. It can't be the sole consideration speed limit setting under the MBTCD. It's not supposed to be. Okay, so an example of group 1 streets. These are smaller streets. On the left, one more in a suburban context, one in an urban context, both in Schenectady. Both had low existing motor vehicle traffic volumes, lots of activity on the street. That's the kind of street where this is the low-hanging fruit of the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. And in many cases, if we were in Massachusetts, we'd be able to do 20 miles per hour for these streets. Group 2 streets evaluated, as I mentioned, case by case. These are both streets that we looked at more specifically, and in both cases they have more motor vehicle traffic volume than we see on the local streets, but they had speeds that were within a range where we felt that the median speed was going to be brought down by actually reducing the speed limit. And that's also partially because of their design. One lane each way, or in the case of Altamont Avenue on the right, it's one lane each way, but there's a center line, right? So there's these are the kinds of streets where it only really takes one driver doing the right thing to keep the speeds down. There were some cases, this is an example in Schenectady, this is a case where we recommended retaining the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit. And that's in part because it has really complete separation of people walking and biking. They get to use that trail on the left, and there's no retail land use. There's very little residential land use, mostly larger kind of warehousing and things that have their own driveway-based access and aren't primarily accessed by walking. So this is a very different context from the other streets we saw. And I'll harp on State Street a little more, but in downtown, great, at 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. I think it's very intuitive to see why this would be appropriate in downtown. And again, in Massachusetts, we'd be able to go to 20 in a case like this. Further into the general urban zone, out of the urban core downtown, it's a major transit route. It carries CDTA's busiest bus line, the 905, and people have to access that, including at unsignalized crossings. So that's another place where 25-mile-per-hour limit comes in handy. And again, it's one lane each way. So there is a speed limiting effect by reducing the speed limit. Individual drivers get to really control the speeds. And as it goes further out, it's still one lane each way, but more of the crossings are at signalized intersections, and it had an existing 35-mile-per-hour speed limit. We're recommending stepping it down to 30 miles per hour. And Erie Boulevard's an example where it's multi-lane. Part of it had median speeds that were higher 30 part of it had median speeds that were closer to 30. And so we had distinct recommendations, largely based on the context of this part is median divided. And it was seen as it's a more appropriate place for the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit. And if you go to the next slide, it's then as it goes through downtown Schenectady, Erie Boulevard is not divided. It's signalized. There are a lot of signals close together. This is an ideal place for a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. So just to talk about some of the steps in implementation, this is a bit generic, but in general, if you've got a city that's primarily 30 miles per hour now, or a village that's primarily 30 miles per hour now, you need to post the new speed limit on major streets, and ideally in places where you've got heavy turns off of streets that will have a higher speed limit, that will retain a higher speed limit. So that coming from a 30-mile-per-hour street, you get the sign, okay, it's 25 now. And then replacement of any of the existing signs in the interior of the city. And then finally, replacement of signs on streets with that have a higher speed limit, but that are changing, and removal of any of the remaining 30-mile-per-hour signs on local streets. But part of implementation is at least thinking about speed management and traffic calming measures. Because the goal here, we know that changing speed limits changes speeds. I've talked about that a million times to this group, but we know that that's not enough on all streets. So the reports that we're preparing have different recommendations for different cities, but this is at a very simple level, local streets and small collector streets and other one-lane each-way streets, very amenable to gateway treatments, things where and pinch points where we pinch down the width of the street at key points to slow down traffic that's turning off of major streets, or within a neighborhood, or within a downtown. Radar speed feedback signs are popular. I think most of the cities in the region have used them, and they have a lot of utility, especially during the initial phase of 25-mile-per-hour implementation. They really reinforce that that's the appropriate speed. But there's a very wide variety of speed management techniques, including vertical deflection. That's very general term for speed humps, speed cushions, raised crosswalks, anything that makes a vehicle go up and then down. And in traffic calming terminology, we sometimes talk about horizontal deflection, but that's just a very technical term for anything that makes a motor vehicle not follow a completely straight line through a street. So anything like curb extension that might make a driver slow down simply because they're closer to the edge of the roadway at the curb extension than they would be if there was no curb extension there. But there are a lot of ways to achieve these things, and one of the things that I'll say here is that most of these things can be achieved through, they can all be achieved through a full construction process, but they can also be achieved on a faster basis, either through markings and other interim treatments, or through or in the case of things like speed humps, they can often be implemented on a spot basis, even by asphalt crews that have a little bit of experience and have a template doing that. So that's something these are things that are inherently scalable. So don't be afraid of them. They don't have to be full, full curb line reconstruction. They can be things that we start small and then scale. Tomorrow we're having a bit of a roundtable on speed limits, on speed limit implementation specifically. And Carrie, I don't know if there's anything else we should say about that right now, but that's
It's just good to see, with all the different, efforts happening around the region that, starting to get into some, nuts and bolts of kind of how we're rolling it out, how we're doing it, making sure that kind of approaches are, similar across the region.
Yeah, basically, it's for municipalities that already know that they're gonna change their speed limits to talk to and those that already did to talk to each other about the details of sign purchasing and sign work.
Where it's getting out there in the region, I think everyone's trying to, do it fast.
and I wanna note where we've got really call Saratoga Springs and Green Island, call them revised draft, full draft under final review. And I'm excited to work on more speed management countermeasures as we work on the systemic treatment packages.
Yeah, we want to make sure that those are fairly plug and play options for everyone, in the plan.
But yeah, questions?
I would have a question for our esteemed guest from DMV about maybe funding for educational campaigns and kind of promotion of revised speed limits. I don't know if there's an answer now or if that's just something we'll talk about offline.
Yeah, I didn't see my public info campaigns.
Yeah, I know. Well,
That is in the report.
I know, kind of looking at the eligibility and applicability of that with GTSC funding.
We can talk offline.
Okay. Kind of how these folks might, either individual jurisdictions or others might work together to kind of get the word out.
We've seen a lot of good examples of messages, multimedia campaigns, material that can be on billboards, on, everything from YouTube videos to, I'm not kidding, bathroom stall ads have been successful in some places across the country.
Well, it's good to mix it up, I
Yeah.
mean. Yeah, I do know that we're gonna be putting our call letter out for new grantee, new grants coming up, that should be coming out. Around the first week of March, so, these ideas certainly are things to be considered and. GTSC is very much wanting to get out there and get these messages out. I mean, certainly we have the same desire that everyone in this room and on this call has, that to get to zero would be fantastic. Because I don't like the way our numbers have been going. And anything we can do to get it to go the other way is great.
Thanks. Any other questions? If not,
No,
Right.
I guess we could talk a bit about where we are, I'll try to overview where we're at with our corridor concepts, and we can talk to folks in the region. Street safety investigations, Matthew, your team's been moving ahead on those, and we'll be moving into some more site visits with the city of Albany coming up.
that's right. As the weather warms and the snow melts, we'll be doing the second half of our on-site investigations. We've done crash analysis for all of the sites.
Then kind of within those 6 locations, our road safety audits, we've completed our site visits, we're drafting our reports, including the street safety investigations, extra capitalized S, and provide us for comments. We've had our community workshops, including our last one in Albany last night. Really great opportunity to go out there and walk with the community. get feedback as well. And we're gonna roll all of these three kind of component pieces into the corridor concept plans, by this. We're looking to have some time to talk with our facility owners, making sure that everyone likes those ideas. Then take those back out again, you know, through maybe some virtual meetings for our public engagement, or depending on our other cycles of going out to those areas as well. All these activities, et cetera. Just talk a little about some of the key findings I think we've been having through some of the process here. As you know, this has been a hotspot type process, you know, looking at, again, identifying these sites through our network screening of looking at places overrepresented. And we've kind of trying to carry this through the corridor concept process. It's kind of that whole pipeline farm system of having really holistic recommendations. So I mean, a lot of the issues we've been seeing are coming through some speed management in some of these local areas, sidewalk and ADA ramp condition. And lighting too has been an issue that's come up consistently throughout these investigations, and a lot of feedback. Something that I think we hear more of in some more rural areas, but lack a little bit lighting improvements, I think, are something that we're going to look to address more holistically and systemically. Kind of where we're going with these too is that the corridor concepts are really more inclusive of broader complete streets improvements, and not solely safety countermeasures. So as we look at some of the implementation of this, it may be one or multiple projects. And you know, looking to identify systemic treatments that we can be doing in the near term, while maybe keeping other longer term projects in there as well. Looking at particulars like Saratoga Springs, I mean, I think we've identified a number of cooks in the kitchen through some other development projects, new police station, as well as conventional roadway projects. And even though we call this corridor concepts, 3 of our areas have been, you know, kind of district level plans. And we think that's been really effective in helping us identify, you know, look at, rather than just looking at one corridor and trying to Swiss Army knife every possible user need and solution in there. I think we've been able to look at creating some alternative routes, looking at picking, not picking winners, but kind of assessing, you know, really roles throughout the network.
Yeah, and I'd add that one of the key things here is that the corridors are primarily in areas where there were pedestrian serious injuries or fatalities, or bicyclist serious injuries, and as well as motor vehicle occupant injuries and fatalities. And when we're talking about people walking and biking, we have to at least examine whether there is network for them. So that's one of the things that you know, the safety involves good access, which involves a good network. So creating a safe place on these streets is a broader it's a broader effort than simply saying like, okay, well there is a specific speed problem, so we'll do a speed management item. So we are taking a fuller design look at them.
We're looking forward to having these be, you know, featured items in the plan, and then looking at some of, you know, being a core of our safety improvement program. Looking good for time here, looking at the safety improvement program. One thing that's really we're excited about for this project is being able to do bringing together both our education enforcement and other programs into this as well. So you know, compiling a lot of the broad strategies, projects and programs that we've been collecting throughout this. One thing we want to talk about today, and kind of having this funding be agnostic, well, not agnostic, but really looking at having it multiple fund streams and, you know, hopefully being able to cross pollinate different opportunities as well too. One thing I want to discuss today is, and we kind of begin to clarify kind of the priorities that we're looking at and making sure that if there are some things that aren't coming through the pipeline that we've thought about yet, to what would be some of the priority projects. So we'd really be looking at creating really kind of a bench. You know, really a good, not a bench, yeah, a bench of really kind of for maybe some of the next 5 years of just within this aspect of the whole greater amount of safety programs, looking at these capital projects. So kind of for only NPO people, I mean, an illustrative list of projects. So not really guaranteed for funding, but really kind of getting folks in gear to maybe look at examining these projects, considering them for the next step, doing some other pre-development work and analysis that they right. We think we can identify some high-level scope of these, and which is the hotspot locations and kind of crash patterns. So, you know, addressing left turn crashes at this intersection, looking at right turn conflicts, looking at, you know, particular pedestrian needs along a corridor. And so as we look to develop this, rather, because this would be one part of the plan that I think would be somewhat prioritized, as opposed to here's a whole inventory of ideas, recommendations, really helping this begin to be a balance of some of our multiple priorities. So how do we balance our hotspots versus systemic treatments? How do we look at the needs on the state system versus the local system, knowing that our fatalities and serious injuries are about half and half, urban versus rural needs, key emphasis areas in the strategic highway safety plan. And keeping in mind too, maybe some cross-cutting strategies or regional type projects that would be of benefit for the entire network. Not a, this diagram on the right is not intended to be a per scale slice of the pie. But as we're moving forward and trying to really assess, kind of come up with the terminology, something, a nomenclature which everyone's aware of and okay with, really beginning to kind of use some of these core buckets for priorities. As we're looking at, you know, so where do we do to kind of take some of these street safety investigation sites, some of the corridor concepts, projects that may not be part of the next upcoming TIP. We'd like to identify about 10 of those at the local level. Looking at some of the then also for systemic treatment packages, kind of identifying some of our priority focused facilities as well there too. And so I think with this, we can look at for those spots that we may be at priorities where there still may be further work, investigation, alternatives done. Looking to identify those, but maybe not specifying them entirely. And lastly, too, like systemic treatments at, you know, 40 miles of areas of roadway marshes and so forth. You don't, I think, you know, throughout so much of the process is kind of every idea has been a good idea and everything. There's so many different avenues to which so many things can get funded, but I think as I'm looking at particularly this one NPO process. How do we begin to sort of set the table with our different kind of food groups? Just wanted to see if folks think that this is inclusive of some of the types of projects we have, whether there's other regional projects that, you know, may be missing. Other areas that we need to make sure that we're doing.
In one of your previous presentations, you noted how many of the crashes are caused by young people.
Yeah,
Were there, and this is primarily design recommendations, but I just want to bring up again, driver's ed.
yeah, within this subset, yeah. So really for our education programs, really recognizing and going through the analysis of GTSC's annual grant agreement with AGA. So we're looking at identifying where some of the gaps are, and definitely driver's education's been missing.
Sorry, Alex, do you mind sharing your screen?
Have I stopped sharing? Or of course, on this categories page.
Right now, it's not showing any. I think before the question was asked, I think you stopped sharing. Yeah. Thank you.
When we're talking about driver education, are we talking about enhancements to the driver's education program? Or are we talking about, meaning like the type of driver education that will get before they get their license as they're, or
Well, not
talking
making
about
them-
public information?
Not making it
campaign?
optional. Like making it part of some sort of school curriculum. Because all of our lives are at stake.
If I could just jump in real quick with something that DOH is doing right now to address that concern. So we've actually been working with the Think Fast Interactive program. It holds holding about 5 sessions throughout New York State high schools, and the goal really is to increase younger driver safety awareness and behaviors. And we took in some information that we gained from the vulnerable roadway user focus groups that we were doing, one of which we did in a high school in Albany. And so we're kind of taking this interactive program across the state right now. Will be in Rochester, Yonkers, Ramapo, Brownsville, and Albany. So I think 5 have been scheduled so far. So we're kind of looking for ways to address some of that concern that you have.
Does it cost anything to the schools?
It does not. So we're using grant funds to be able to deliver that education to those schools.
Fantastic.
Other initiatives, we've been missing other needs, I know we've talked, with some groups about bringing, through some of our policy and process changes too, talking about, bringing back sort of safe routes to school as a targeted, effort as well. Safe routes to transit, identifying, some needed crossings as well, and keeping evaluation planning and data somewhat as its own subset as well, of things that would get to be funded. I think for the next time we meet with this group, we're putting into, working with, CRTC staff and some of our administrative committee will look to, narrow down some of these preliminary lists. Particularly with the street safety investigations, our corridor concepts, looking at what's getting to fill some of that bench, and prioritizing, where we've had some of our systemic treatment packages, some of those best options. While maybe respecting to some of NISDOT's process, of their annual work program and their pipeline to come. Want to note that some of the past performance of the TIP projects, we've, will look to present that at another time. We, just wanted to make sure we validate some more data. Then I guess some of the last updates that we have here today, some of our street safety investigations, Matthew, I think you said we're wrapping those up here with Albany. And then,
Yeah, so the street safety investigations are underway, but we've already done site visits for a few dozen of the 41 sites. The remainder of the sites are primarily within the city of Albany. And we'll be getting to those soon. And then it will be we'll be reaching out to the street owners, maintainers, you all cities, when we have draft investigations, which will most likely be short and to the point about these sites. And again, Alex kind of noted some of the very common things that we saw in the field, but you should definitely expect discussion of sidewalk condition and discussion of illumination and discussion of speed management and discussion of accessibility. Those are some of the things that we both saw and focused on in our field investigations.
nice, and should be able to distribute to this group, after some review with, very, process recommendations. We've looked in through a number of areas of tuning, finding interventions within the roadway safety management process. Street development, post-crash care, funding, working with local codes. We got a lot of good feedback from the community advisory committee this week, so we will be looking to ramp that up. And we will be discussing coming out for next round of community engagement in round 2, highlighting the feedback that we've received throughout the process and how that's shaping some of our initial recommendations. And trying to make sure that we're still keeping our eyes on the prize for key themes and issues that we've heard.
We do have the second round of community engagement scheduled with locations. So I will email that out to everyone after the meeting or with the
I think we're,
meeting notes.
making sure we have that finalized. So I think we're good and we're working on press releases and materials.
March though.
March, yes. Stay tuned very soon.
Final questions? Is there a question?
No.
Any final questions on the Safe Streets and Roads for All project? Also known as the Safety Action Plan. Yeah. I think you can stop sharing. And then other updates, I have on here 2 things from us. This manifest. So we can give our updates, Andrew Sattinger, if you do have any updates you wanted to provide on this, the roadway departure plans or anything else, we can come back to you after in motion. Andrew Tracy, do you have an update on the draft transportation improvement program release?
Yes, we have been hard at work the last few months preparing an update to our capital program, the list of all of the transportation projects receiving at least partial federal funding in the capital region. We're putting the finishing touches on it now. We presented the program to Planning Committee in January and got recommendation to bring it to the Policy Board meeting next Thursday on March 6th. So once approved by the Policy Board, the draft 2025 to 2030 capital program will be released for public review. So keep an eye on our website, probably the day after, maybe March 7th is when we'll start putting all those materials up on the website. Take a look, and if you have any questions or comments about any of it, there'll be information on the website about how to submit a comment or ask a question. We will also be hosting we'll be hosting two events, a virtual tip meeting and then an in-person open house. Both of those will be held in March. All of the information about those events will be put on the website as well. So that's the latest on the tip update.
Thank you. And then for the in motion Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which if you worked with us in the past, we used to call New Visions. There's a link to the project website on the agenda. And we are still working on that and still in progress with the draft plan expected to be released for public review in June of this year. And with that, Andrew Sattinger, was there any updates that you wanted to give?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think I was talking before and I realized I was not actually connected in the introductions earlier. No, we're still waiting for an announcement on the roadway departure plan. That's all I can say about that. The plan is still out there, so I mean, people can be planning. You know, everything that's eventually going to be included is all incorporated in that original plan. So I'm trying not to say anything but still say something, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I mean, we really need these projects to come in, and I know it's all waiting on us to announce the plan. So don't put those projects away, is what I'm saying. They will have a home here shortly, I believe. And the local road safety plans. Remember that those are part of the that roadway departure plan as well. So I know a lot of MPOs have already done their SS4A grants, but I don't know if those were the implementation grants or not. So I mean, you could also think of some of this HSIP as that implementation side of it, you know. So if you've already got the plan, now you can implement some of that. Or if you want to update the plan, that can probably be included as well. And I know we've been trying to find some time to get some training on CLEAR for everybody. And I think I'm still waiting on some dates from possibly Mike Perry. But I'll coordinate. I'll get some other emails around to find some dates, because we're finalizing all our documentation for the analysis procedures, the red and yellow book, and stuff like that. So we want to make sure once we get that out, we get the training to go with it. So we'll just be looking for dates coming up here soon for that.
Andrew, when you say you're putting together training for everyone, is that geared Who's that geared for?
We were gonna do a special MPO type, local type, investigation procedures training.
We've had some discussion, as part of this safety action plan work with, I think mostly city staff, but municipal staff who are interested to learn about CLEAR. I'm not sure how much interest there is in using the safety application, but definitely just the data viewer part of it. I think they would use the safety application. I think there's potential.
Once they realize, what they can, what they get with that. No, we could do it. That's a good idea, actually. If we do a CDV, data viewer / safety combined training, because you can use, the two are kind of complementary. You can pull up queries from your data viewer in Clear Safety and then investigate those, fully to get the PSI and statistical tests of proportions and all that. So yeah, we could do it that way if you want. Kind of cover that way. Some people get, the familiarity with the tool maybe they're already using, and then they see the potential that they can get with the other app. And so yeah, we'll reach out and try and find some times with you guys. And that's all I have, really.
Thank you. Just a reminder, our next meeting is scheduled for May 29th, and then for the rest of the year would be August 28th and December 11th. And before we break, is there anything anybody else would like to say? Mark?
Yeah, we recently released a report entitled The Capital Region's Aging Population, Demographics, Housing, and Costs of Care. So I have all that information in it. We are also hosting a training on March 26th from 10 to 11 on how to use our capitalregionindicators.org website, which includes a dashboard for every county, city, town, village, school district, zip code, census tract, block group, and block in the capital district, including more than 50 indicators. We'll also be going through how to use data.census.gov during that training as well. March 26th.
Thank you. Anybody online?
Just appreciated the presentation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for joining us today. All right, well, with that, thank you for joining, and we'll see you on May 29th.
Thank you.
Thank you.